Welcome to the second in our series of Kildrummy CostCasts. If you recall the first session, we were discussing how spreadsheets for cost management can introduce risk on our projects. We specifically focused on the commonality aspect and the infinite flexibility of spreadsheets and the problems that can bring, and how we address that using a professional cost management system to create a common approach in delivering work processes. For today's session, we're going to look at continuity. How we create continuous and consistent reports and outputs in a way that can create confidence in the data that we're producing as a cost management team. So now let's take a look at continuity, or in another word, consistency. So many of us have been in a situation where we join a project and there's this all singing, all dancing spreadsheet that's known as the single miracle. It can produce any reports for anybody, can sort it in any way, can be sliced and diced, etc. The only issue with that is there's probably only one person on the project who knows how to use it. In addition to that, we have a situation where from project A, that massively wonderful spreadsheet perhaps is not so easily used on project B. And we'll look at that in a moment. And those two things combined together create a situation where we may not be delivering consistent outputs across our projects, or indeed within the same project month to month. And then finally, we'll look at, well, how does Kildrummy Cost Management address that situation in order that we can deliver a continuous and consistent solution that adds value to the project? So let's talk about that single miracle. So this is probably a wonderful spreadsheet, and as I've said previously, spreadsheets have their place. This spreadsheet, however, has multiple pivot tables. It could have embedded and complex situations and macros. But the issue with that is when we come to actually run the report at the end of the month, at the critical time of the month, it's a kind of a problem. Something happens. The macro that we ran that imports X data from Y system suddenly has crashed. Or the copy routine that runs on that macro isn't working. Well, where's Jim, the guy that created that macro? Get Jim over here. We need to get this report produced as soon as possible. The issue with that is, well, let's try and find Jim. The issue with finding Jim is he's probably on holiday somewhere, enjoying himself on a beach somewhere, having a great time. So we are now stuck with a problem where the super user of our spreadsheet is unavailable and we can't produce our reports on time. That's the issue with these single awesome spreadsheets where only one person truly has the knowledge of how that really works. If we move forward then into, let's say, repeatability. So even if we manage to get that spreadsheet working and Jim shares his knowledge on how he created that spreadsheet and the embedded macros, etc. Well, now we want to move from that project to the next project, to project B. So we need to create a new spreadsheet. We need to create this new environment and import the new WBS and so on and so forth. But in addition to that, we have a new team member. And that new team member has her own abilities and her methodologies when using spreadsheets. So there's two options here. Well, does she take Jim's spreadsheet and kind of manipulate that and reinvent the wheel? Or worse still, does she begin to then create something new with potentially new terminologies and new calculations that introduces yet another level of risk? These are the situations that can happen when you have that level of flexibility. But in addition to that, those differing calculations and definitions can also create confusion when we start to create our outputs. Now, if we don't have those consistent outputs, we start to get the question from senior management, well, these reports look different. Are you sure this is the same data as we used last month? Or can we be sure that the value that was in the previous month's forecast is now in the current month's previous forecast? And translation of last month's final actuals to this month's previous actuals, etc. That kind of transition of data that can be very difficult inside a spreadsheet in order to control. And that takes time. That reconciliation activity and the verification activity can take a lot of time, and that time taken reduces the amount of time the cost management team can actually spend analyzing the data. They're spending much more time actually verifying it. So now I come to produce my reports, and the reports are produced and I hand them over to the senior management guys, and during the monthly meeting we start to get the question of, well, these reports don't look the same. They're not consistent to what we produced last month. Can we be really trusting of this information? And suddenly there's a discussion that happens around, is this report correct, as opposed to, what is this report actually showing me? Where do we have problems and how can we address them? So it's more about a credibility of the data discussion as opposed to, well, what are we going to do to create better solutions for the problems that we face? And it could well be something as simple as, well, the reason the reports look different is because when the cost team ran the reports, they chose a different runtime choice. They chose a different sort order, or they chose a different selection. These things are very easily done inside of a spreadsheet system where you do not have a consistent and standardized way of saving and storing your reports so that you deliver those consistent outputs. So how do we rectify that situation? How can we create a more consistent solution? Well, inside of Kildrummy Cost Management, we have some very fundamental aspects that allow us to make sure what we deliver to the users and therefore what the users deliver to the management team is consistent, and it's a continuous way of operating. It's workflow driven so that the processes that we're supporting from month 1 to month 3 to month 12 to month 36 are the same. The way in which we deploy the system is the same. The ability to then move from one project to another, clearly there has to be some level of similarity, is very straightforward. You have a quick start approach, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to go back and spend all of that time recreating a new spreadsheet or tweaking a previous spreadsheet, changing the field names and the calculations in those fields, etc. We also ensure that when the team has decided what the outputs need to be every month, those reports can be saved and stored. And we'll look at that in a moment when we go into the demonstration. So clearly having a consistent approach engenders belief in what the cost team is delivering to the management team. And it also means that the management team are ensured that the cost team are spending their time actually analyzing the information rather than purely either re-inputting it or verifying it or reconciling it. So let's take a look at how that looks inside of a professional cost management system in Kildrummy Cost Management Solutions. So in our previous bubble that we looked at for commonality, we talked about the workflow manner in which Kildrummy Cost Management is driven. Those workflow processes allow us to have a common user interface. But moving forward from that, on the consistency point of view, it's about producing data. It's about producing important deliverables that the team need. And one of the best ways that we can do that is to store and save our favorite reports that we need to run. This allows me to very quickly be able to run a consistent set of reports that all are relative to the exact same manner in which it was run in the previous month, and I can simply select the reports from my dashboard, which is completely user configurable, and then I know and I can be confident that that deliverable is going to look exactly the same as it did last month, but purely with updated data. And this will then engender the belief in the data with the team, in the data that we're creating, and rather than them looking at it trying to find indiscrepancies, they can actually be looked at to find the correct information very quickly. So here we can see the report has been run, but even if I wasn't happy necessarily with the sort order that we had here, I have the capability to change my sort order simply by clicking in certain boxes, and I resubmit the report. Now you can see we have a different sort order, and again we could do it the same way. We could summarize rather than having it right down at the resource level. We could even roll that up to a higher level, either the commitment or the master agreement level. Very simple, very quick ways of generating consistent outputs. The next in the series we'll look at scalability, how we can have a consistent and continuous system that is common across my turnaround and shutdown style projects or my major capital projects. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you in our next session.